Did you know June is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month? And because of that, we're having an expert panel right now on how to take care of our brains and also to maybe prevent Alzheimer's disease and dementias. So we hope you get a lot out of this. So the first thing I'll do is, as everybody's kind of coming in here, I'll introduce our panelists that are going to be joining us today. And I guess I should say first that my name's Ed Park and I'm the founder of NeuroReserve, and we're very privileged to host this panel. We're a preventive health and nutrition company, especially in brain health. So that's why we care about this so much. And our panelists are going to be Annie Fenn, MD. She'll be joining us in a moment. And she's the founder of Brain Health Kitchen. She goes around the world and she teaches people how to cook and eat better for their brain health. She's also recently released a book called The Brain Health Kitchen, Preventing of Alzheimer's through food. So that's a great book out there that just recently got released. And another panelist is Travis Macy. He's a world-renowned ultra endurance athlete, record holder in some of the most intense endurance events out there. So he'll be joining through this. He's a researcher at Rush University Medical Center, and he'll be telling us about lifestyle and overall behavioral changes. And another panelist that we have is Nikki DeLoach. And Nikki, we've spoken with her many times on this topic. She's great, but she had a last-minute change in travel plans, so she won't be joining us, but we love her, and she's here in spirit. And finally, our fourth panelist is a person named Liz Humphreys. And Liz is right here with me.
Hello.
In the same location. So, and Liz.
2 for 1.
So, exactly. And hey, so I was just doing a little intro for everybody as we were all kind of queuing in and getting started here. But what I wanted to say actually is that the thing that we all have in common, and Tom will be joining us about halfway through, but one thing we all have in common here is two things. One is that we all have personal and family experiences with dementia. And the second thing is that we're all connected and support and are involved in Mind What Matters. So I'm just going to kind of move over this way a little bit like that, right?
Oh, I like
and
that
Liz
shirt,
could come
Travis.
in. There we go.
That's great.
Yeah, hey.
Hi, guys.
Hey, everyone, awesome.
Okay, everybody, Ed, before you move your way out of the screen here, Ed's a bit camera shy, everyone. I want everyone to do their Brady Bunch wave. Do you remember when we did this last July? I love this. It's so great to see all your faces at one time. It's like the Mind What Matters fundraiser round 2. Everybody. Except for we're not going to have Ed dancing like a machine. Maybe we'll save that for the end.
No, that's supposed to be a secret. That's a secret. Now it's not a secret.
Well, hi everybody. Good to see you guys. Hey, Travis.
Great to see you guys. I'm just honored to be in this crowd with all of you. So thanks for having me.
Hang on, we're going to turn up the volume here just a second. There we go. Can you guys hear us a bit better? Okay. All right, well, let's kick things off. Who's excited about learning about brain health in Alzheimer's and Brain Health Awareness Month, everybody? We've got a lot we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk about all things brain health. So we're going to talk to Dr. Fenn about how you can use food as medicine to prevent Alzheimer's and cognitive decline later in life. Ed's given that one the thumbs up. We're going to talk to Travis about how to stay active and physically move your body as you get older and how to stay fit in a healthy way. Not sure Travis has really mastered the word of balance in his exercise routine, but he's going to teach all of you how to find that, and especially how to just find new and creative ways to get moving. Then I will spend some time talking about caregiving and sort of the challenges and the hurdles that come as a caregiver for both mental health, physical health, all of those things. Then Tom's going to jump in here around the 1:30 mark, and he's going to share some new science with us. What else, Ed?
Some overall lifestyle. He's one of the foremost researchers in lifestyle and behavioral changes that people can make to prevent Alzheimer's. They're doing great research out there, so he can color everything we're speaking about as well.
So basically what Annie and Travis and I do not cover, Tom will jump in, and he's our catch-all. He knows everything about brain health.
Oh,
So,
and the cognitive training piece. That's it. So yeah, you'll be hitting that.
And we're really sad that our dear friend Nikki Deloach cannot join us today. She is also on the board of Mind What Matters and a huge part of our A-team of alls, as we like to call it. But she is traveling at the last minute to get home to her kiddos today, and she sends her regrets that she could not be here. But don't worry, we still have 2 weeks left in June, and there's a small chance we'll be doing this again from the Mind What Matters account. So if you missed her today, she will have a copy of the recording on her Instagram as well, but you will be able to see us probably later in the month. So, all right, guys, let's dive right in. Somehow these hours with you go very quickly, so I'm not going to hold back any punches. Dr. Fenn, everyone, the spotlight is going to start with you. Let's talk about finding a way to prevent Alzheimer's and other related dementias through nutrition. Tell us a little bit about yourself and sort of how you found yourself into the land of brain health and your tie to the disease. And let's just hear what you have to say about how to protect your brain.
Thanks for putting this together, Ed. It's always great to be with my Mind What Matters fellow board members, trailblazers in Alzheimer's prevention education. So I'm Annie Fenn. I'm a physician. I'm a chef, and I just recently published a book, as Ed mentioned, called The Brain Health Kitchen: Preventing Alzheimer's Through Food. And I became interested in this topic around 2015. This is where Tom Holland comes into the story. He and his colleagues at Russia published a paper called The Mind Diet Study, which many of you may be familiar with. But I had been following the research with my medical background and my culinary background on how aging populations age successfully and without dementia. And I became fairly obsessed by this topic back then. And then since 2015, we've had not only the Mind Diet, but dozens and dozens of papers that show that the way you eat and the lifestyle that you have, which includes exercise and sleep, stress mitigation, things like that, they can really move the needle and prevent cognitive decline. We're talking age-related cognitive decline, we're talking Alzheimer's disease, we're talking Parkinson's disease, and we're talking especially vascular dementia, the type you get from pre-existing cardiovascular disease. So all of these dementias, especially Alzheimer's, the most common one, can be prevented with a combination of brain healthy nutrition and lifestyle. And so this week has become my focus since 2015. I started the Brain Health Kitchen as a cooking school. It's still the only cooking school of its kind focused specifically on this topic. I have a newsletter that I write about it. Now we have a book for everyone to have recipes where they can learn how to cook brain healthy. I think the most important message here is the science is so solid that following a certain dietary pattern, and this is not a diet, this is not something that you go on in January and then you go off of it in February and then you go back to whatever you were doing before. This is about tapping into what is important to you. What are the things that make you want to age more successfully? How do you want to start taking care of your brain? And how will you do that? I think it all starts with the brain health mindset. You ask yourself, why do you want to take care of your brain? Is it because you're watching a parent struggle with Alzheimer's and you see what that's like? And maybe you don't want to have your children have to go through the same experience you are. That's a big why for a lot of us. Or maybe you just have a lot of cool plans, you know, in your 70s, 80s, and 90s. Maybe you're finally going to be free to travel the world. And, you know, Travis is still going to be doing these ultimate extreme adventure races, even in those decades. Maybe you want to write a book. Maybe you want to start a new business. Maybe you want to get an RV and travel around the country. Like, what is it that you want to be doing? What does your life want to be like, you know, in these later decades? People are living longer thanks to all the strides in medicine. That means that people are becoming more at risk for dementia, and we are seeing a tsunami of cases of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias because of our aging population. So I believe that the brain health starts in the kitchen. I think that the brain health nutrition science is really easy to access. There are basically 10 brain healthy food groups and 6 food groups to limit or avoid. And I go into that in detail in my book and some other places on my newsletter and in my website. But basically this is a plant-based diet where you're choosing mostly whole food. And you're saying no to ultra processed foods. You're saying no to sugary drinks, which we know are directly detrimental to the memory center of the brain, the hippocampus. You're saying no to a lot of the saturated fat foods that are laden in the American diet. The combination of saturated fat and the American diet is really bad for the brain. So we're going to reach for more brain-friendly fats, like those you get from olive oil and nuts and seeds and fish and avocados, things like that, the mono and polyunsaturated fats.
This can all be very, very delicious. As Annie
So this
will
is
tell
the thing
you.
about eating for brain health. It's not difficult to get started. It's also the most delicious foods. It does mean getting off junk food. It does mean not drinking soda pop or diet sodas anymore and switching to, just plain coffee or tea or water. It does mean kind of, saying no to this industrial food system that has been pretty much evolved to now that 60% of all Americans' calories come from ultra-processed food. So we really need to flip that around so that we are eating mostly whole foods. And that's the best way to nourish the brain. So I would say the best way to start is think about the foods that you really love. Like, there must be some vegetables you love. There must be some leafy greens you love. There must be some nuts and some seeds, some types of fish and seafood that you love. There must be some beans or lentils that you love. And even if you don't love beans, maybe you like hummus, which is made from chickpeas. And instead of stocking your cupboard with tortilla chips and potato chips, then maybe when you go to the grocery store, you just get these little packages of hummus. I take these on the trail. I throw them in my backpack. Sometimes I have them in the car if I'm actually starving. But hummus with some, chopped up vegetables or even some whole grain crackers is a really, really good snack, and it gives you a serving of beans too. So the fact that willpower.
Now, people out there who are listening, for people who are listening, if you want to type in like your favorite food, and we could see what you're thinking, those favorite brain healthy foods that kind of Annie went through, any one of them, just go out there and write it out. If you have any questions, of course, always write it out as well. So I'm trying to jump in here. I think I can do a little bit of that.
I would love
encouraging people to just kind of
I love
think
to hear
about
what your
that
brain
for a
healthy
moment.
foods are, and that's where you start.
You
start with the berries you like, the leafy greens you like, and then you can build your own food pyramid around that. And the other thing I just want to talk about real briefly is this concept of willpower. We think that we should have willpower to resist certain foods, like potato chips and onion dip, for example, or like a pepperoni pizza. But most of it, willpower has been shown not to be a real thing. Social scientists have shown us that willpower is not something we should rely on. What we need to do is switch our thinking to our food environment. Okay, if you put a bag of potato chips in front of me, chances are I will eat them. Therefore, I don't bring, a lot of these snack foods into my home. I don't have them in my car. I don't have them at my desk. I manipulate my food environment so that the brain healthy choice is the easiest choice. And I don't have to rely on willpower to say no, because we've been indoctrinated since we were little kids to eat these foods and that these foods are comforting and healthy, when actually they're everything but. They're comforting in the short term, but they're detrimental in the long term. And they're basically contributing to the Alzheimer's epidemic in our country. So we need to say no to these foods, control your food environment. Don't rely on willpower. It's not a thing. I wish it was, but it's not. Maybe Travis has really great willpower. I don't know.
Can I ask you a question actually, Annie?
Yes.
And I agree with you. I mean, even with exercise and stuff, it's not about willpower. It's about creating habits and finding a way to enjoy these things. So it's not this grind. It's just like what you do. But anyway, my question for you, Annie, is you said that, we've been indoctrinated since we were kids to eat in these ways with processed foods, et cetera. What's your advice for those of us who have younger kids? My kids are 10 and 12, and like, man, I look at your book and I'm like, this is so beautiful. And then I go to my parents' house and my mom is like cooking recipes for your book every single day. And I love them and my kids love them. And then in my own daily life with my family, I'm like, man, I'm working, my wife's working, like we got soccer practice, it's like this, just all this stuff.
Yeah.
What's your advice? Like, how do we, I know it's not going to be perfect, but how do we make it better, especially with kids, with habits?
I
What do you
love
think
this
about that?
question. And it's so important, because most of the research we have on how to prevent cognitive decline comes through studying people at middle life. But we need to pay attention to the younger generation, because this is where your habits form. This is when you grow up saying, I'm a person who eats healthy food, or I'm a person who exercises every day. This is born in the household where you grow up. And if it's not, you have to really work hard to change that. So all I can say is you don't have 100% control over what your children eat, especially when they get to a certain age, like middle school, high school, and they're off on their sports tournaments and they're out of the home, going to friends' houses. But you do have control over what is in your house and what you feed your children. And so I believe that being very, very consistent with the foods that you choose to give the kids is important. There's a lifelong message there for them that this is how we eat. We eat healthy food. We don't eat junk. You can have that at a sleepover, and I'm not going to freak out or anything, but we don't eat that here at home. And then they get used to how delicious the foods are. It's the foods that they're used to having. And I guarantee that when they get to middle school and high school, they will rebel, and they will enjoy telling you that they went to McDonald's after school. And you're not going to freak out about that either. You're just going to serve, what you normally serve at home, and you're going to make it so that they like it, of course. And I can guarantee you, and this is what studies show, when the kids leave the home and they end up setting up their own kitchen, sometime during college and after college, they fall back on the habits they grew up with. They start to cook with whole foods. And they may not be perfect. They may still be having some junk food, but they will rely on the things that they knew, that they learned at the kitchen table. So you just kind of have to keep persevering and know it's not perfect, and know they're going to try to, rebel and make you feel bad, but that's just what kids do. It's how they separate from us, right?
And Travis, honestly, if I can just interject, I will tell you, the doctor herself was in my kitchen cooking for my children not so very long ago. And I will tell you, she taught me some great tricks. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing overnight change. For those of you who are watching and you do have younger kids at home and you want to try and make a lot of these changes, first of all, Annie's book is a great place to start because she breaks everything down in a way that is, at the risk of sounding really cheesy, very digestible. She really does, though. She proves why what she's trying to teach you works, and she does it in a way that's very easy to follow. The science makes sense. You're not going to get bogged down in just pages and pages of science to kind of sort through on your own, where you'll have to go and Google words that you don't understand. There's a whole first part of the book that really talks about what food groups are important, why they're important, how much to eat of what. It's so easy to understand. And then she really she taught me how to sort of introduce foods like that otherwise your children would never eat. Let's take zucchini, for example. I hated zucchini as a kid. My parents could never get me to eat it. But now I make pasta with it probably twice a week. And so she taught me, she's like, hey, let's make this great pasta. And when we're making it for the kids specifically, let's do half and half. So a way to kind of get them off those like white rice or, white grain noodles, let's add half and half. So maybe you do half spiralized zucchini noodles and half spaghetti, and you mix it up. And if you put enough red sauce and whatever it is on it, turkey meatballs, whatever, kids don't even really notice that they're eating it. But slowly over time, you're changing their taste buds to really appreciate the whole healthy food. And the other added benefit to it is that it fills kids up longer. Rather than them having that big crash after a meal because it's basically full of empty calories, they feel full longer. They're not going back into the kitchen reaching for snacks, an hour after dinner is over, saying, I'm hungry before bedtime. So number one, they sleep better, which who doesn't shout for joy when you're a parent of young children that your children are sleeping better? But also, they just feel better. They don't have as many tantrums.
And I would also add that you don't have to tell them exactly what you're doing all the time. There can be a little mystery to this. I remember the first time I served my kids when they were teenagers, this like cauliflower couscous. It was sort of like it's a lot like the cauliflower fried rice in the book, cauliflower fried rice with kimchi. So it's basically making, a rice dish or couscous dish with cauliflower instead. But I didn't say, oh, you guys, check this out. we are having cauliflower for dinner. I didn't. I knew they were hungry. I try to limit snacking before dinner, and just put out healthy snacks like carrot sticks or something. And then you put down the food. And I swear my boys devoured the cauliflower couscous until it was gone. And they didn't even really notice. So you can be a little stealth.
And the same is true with smoothie. You put enough strawberries in something, with a little, they're not going to notice, 2 cups of spinach or, a little piece of ginger or something. I mean, there really are easy ways to do it. But I think the key is just, right,
slowly,
Annie, over time.
Persistently,
build these
the same message. It's good to be on the same page as your partner, obviously. Mixed messages are really hard for kids. They're always going to go with the easy message. I have to say my oldest now is 25 years old. He's been in an apartment for a while. He doesn't necessarily like to cook at all, but when I go to his house, he has a jar of nice olive oil on the counter. He has a box of arugula in the fridge. He has salmon in the freezer, and he has some asparagus or another vegetable, and I'll take it.
That's a gold medal for a 25-year-old.
There's a lot of beer, but we're not going for perfection here.
One thing I was thinking of is that as we eat more brain healthy, I've noticed that, I didn't have a very good diet for a long time, I'll admit. I think my diet was not so great. But since we've been changing, the kitchen and everything over the past, 4 or 5 years, what I realize is that it's the other side of the coin that happens. Like if I were to say, oh, I really want Doritos Cool Ranch flavor because it's Super Bowl Sunday and we get that as a special treat or something, I don't feel good after I eat it. And so our bodies actually readjust and to where they probably should be so that this becomes almost like a foreign object that we're putting into our bodies.
That's a really good point, Ed. So, you know how when any of us who has raised kids know that you don't let kids get away with not liking a food if they just try it once or twice. The same thing happens as adults. You have to give yourself some time to change your palate. If you're used to having really salty, really sugary, really fat-laden foods all the time, you're going to have to change the way your body experiences that. And when you get to the other side, like Ed is talking about, and your diet is primarily brain-healthy food, your body, your gut microbiome no longer knows what to do with junk food. And it sends you the message that this is not working for me anymore. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
And it also makes it easier, too. I will say, sugar's the one thing we haven't touched on. I'd like you to actually talk about sugar a little bit, Annie, because the effects of sugar alone we're seeing it's just devastating. And not just for preventing Alzheimer's and dementia, but for type 2 diabetes and cancer and heart disease. Sugar just really is, of all the things you can put in your body, I'd say as bad as saturated fats. And there's just so many foods that are sitting in those middle aisles of the grocery store where there's hidden sugar everywhere. Even
and the truth about sugar is that when as adults we become insulin resistant after seeing so much sugar in our bloodstream all the time, it changes the way our body metabolizes it. But the brain also becomes insulin resistant, and the memory center of the brain, the hippocampus, shows signs of insulin resistance. That's why diabetes is a huge risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. But we're also finding from recent studies that pre-diabetes, just having a borderline blood sugar test, maybe just mildly abnormal a few times every few years, also doubles your risk of getting Alzheimer's. So sugar is one of the most important things to pay attention to. It all goes down to like anything you buy at the grocery store. You want to, if it's a food product, you want to look at the nutrition label. You want to zoom in on the added sugars. And you don't want to consume anything that has added sugar in it. Natural sugars are fine as long as you consume them in small amounts and in the context of fiber. For example, when I create a cookie recipe, there's sugar in there because, some baked goods just require sugar to, have certain structure and taste and flavor and, be delicious and all that. But there's always a ton of fiber, like oats or almonds or like even oat bran I use, which is super high in fiber. And the reason for that is a fiber-rich meal slows down the absorption of the sugar. So you can have a treat that's got fiber in it, but if it's all just junky ingredients like white, all-purpose white flour, white sugar, it's going to hit your bloodstream like a Gatorade, okay? And we don't want that. Getting rid of the sugar in the drinks you consume is probably the low-hanging fruit for most people. If you look at all of these drink products that are very popular in the United States, some of them are marketed to be healthy for you, like these energy drinks, right? And now they even have like all these great health claims on them. And some of them are kind of cool. We're getting like a whole faction of the drink industry that has, you know, like adaptogens and, you know, stuff like that. But you know, when it comes right down to it, you don't want to drink anything that has added sugar in it. And this includes juice. This includes, of course, soda. And we're also learning that artificial sweeteners are just as bad as actual sugar for our bodies and for our brain. Yeah. I would love everyone to get back to drinking. You know, what your brain thrives on is water. And if you drink tea, whether it's real tea or an herbal tea, it's full of flavonoids, it's full of antioxidants are good for your brain. If you like coffee, I want you to drink it without additives in it. If you need to have a little bit of sugar, fine, maybe some honey, but you know, try to work towards developing a palate where you don't have to have everything taste sweet anymore. And then, you know, you'll really enjoy your coffee more. You'll notice the flavors of it. You'll enjoy your tea. You'll save a ton of money because you don't have to stock up on all those drink products.
Can I ask you another question, Annie?
Sure.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this and they're thinking like I'm an athlete or I exercise enough that during exercise I'm going to need fuel because I know that that'll keep my body from breaking down. It'll make me perform better and also just, you know, again, not go into a hole of overtraining, et cetera. Is there a difference metabolically between drinking these sugary things, you know, Coke, juice, whatever, drinking it just kind of all day long? And then what about if you have it during exercise? So maybe, you know, hopefully a as clean as possible source of maybe an energy or exercise performance drink that maybe has maltodextrin and fructose and maybe some sodium or something like that. Is the body gonna, if you're taking a lot of that during training, is that gonna increase the risk of, you know, diabetes and high resting blood sugar and stuff, or is it different because you're exercising and it's just getting burned off real quick?
I believe it's different because it's getting burned off so quickly. So when you consume something that has any kind of sugar in it, it goes into your bloodstream, and then in your body, it has to either go to the liver and get, you know, processed into glycogen, which is a storage product, or just get burned off and used as fuel right away. But I would submit that most people, when they're exercising, do not need to consume sugar while they're doing it. The type of exercise that you do and that, you know, elite athletes do is completely different. But like if I'm just going to go out for an hour bike ride, and then maybe I'm going to lift weights for 30 minutes afterwards, maybe that's a normal workout for me or for most people. I probably don't need to be consuming a lot of these electrolyte and sugar boosted drinks. Yep. If you're going to be doing a, you know, 100-mile mountain biking race, or like, what are some of the things that you do? Or like, for example, if I'm going to go climb a mountain, you know, I live in Jackson Hole, we've got a lot of peaks. This is what we do in the summer. If I'm going to go on a 6-mile hike, then yes, I will need to constantly be replenishing because my glycogen stores are going to get burned through a couple hours into my workout. So I know we all like to think of ourselves as athletes, but I think that there's athletes and then there's, you know, like the Travis Macy's of the world who need to really engineer their nutrition. For the rest of us, I think you get hydrated before you go out. You make sure you have some snacks that contain salt. Like I like, for example, a medjool date stuffed with peanut butter, sprinkled with salt, something like that, or hummus and like a Triscuit, which is salty. Like these would be the things I would bring with me to replenish my electrolytes. It's a great question.
Yeah, thank you. That's super helpful. And that's where some of that marketing, we get these ideas like, you know, you're going out for the 20-minute walk, so you need a 32-ounce Gatorade or whatever, you know. Probably not. Like if it's hot out, bring some water on your walk and, you know, cool off. But
Also, there's no reason to ever drink anymore. There's great electrolyte tablets that you can add to plain water that don't have any of that added nonsense in it. That is 100 times better for you. And anyway, unless you're, like Annie said, exercising for longer than an hour, you should not need goos or gels or bars or treats on your, or those little candies. The general rule is, 50 minutes minimum before you need to take one of those. And the average person out there, at least that's middle-aged, is not exercising over an hour every day.
I mean, whenever there's a lot of clever marketing out there, because whenever I put on my Under Armour workout shirt, I feel like I've already worked out. I mean, I feel like I need the shoes right there. I mean, before I even set foot outside. So
that's right.
I
wearing
just
it right
feel
now.
great.
But training log,
So I'm wearing my collared shirt to be like, I got to take the zone here, but this is a great way to start discussing staying physically fit and staying physically active outside.
Yeah, let's go, Travis.
Yeah, so Travis, do you have remarks on that? And then we'll start grilling you on a few things here, because we want to find out what
thanks.
motivates you.
Brief introduction. I'm Travis Macy. I'm here in Salida, Colorado, a little town in the heart of the Rockies, and I'm an athlete, author, speaker, and coach. I also host a podcast called The Travis Macy Show, and we like to talk about actually, everyone here has been a guest on the show. I love talking about this stuff in addition to endurance athletics and that kind of thing. And, also like our other panelists, I was kind of drafted into this relationship with Alzheimer's and other forms of neurodegenerative disease because my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 5 years ago at the age of 64. And, I always want to make clear I'm not pretending to be a medical expert or anything like that. I'm just a guy who's, trying to share a story and make a difference for people. And we've been trying to do that with our book that came out, A Mile at a Time, a couple months ago. Kind of shares my dad's story and stuff. And as far as, the importance of physical activity, Ed's always talking about these pillars, these pillars of cognitive wellness. You got staying active, managing mental health, cognitive training, diet and nutrition. We talked about that a lot. And then relationships. We'll get into that later. But all these things are super important. And, my wheelhouse kind of as an athlete and as a coach of adult endurance athletes is this physical fitness realm. And, as Annie already said, physical fitness, that's going to mean different things to different people. There has been some good research on it. There was, a study from Wake Forest that just showing that consistent, moderate exercise makes a big difference. It's in so many ways, cognitively, but it also does for the cardiovascular system, the heart, the lungs, the circulation of the blood. Like all of these things are connected, and by exercising, you're just making it all better. And my advice, again, when I hear people, we're all wired differently. When I hear people talk about like, willpower to go exercise, I'm like, man, if I don't exercise, like I go nuts, and that's true for some people. It's not true for everyone. For some people, it is hard. It is a grind. And I think that's worth recognizing. But if there's a way that you can somehow over time, just make it part of your habit and part of what you do, and hopefully something that you enjoy at least a bit, that's the way to make it happen. I always tell the athletes I coach, consistency and sustainability are the key here. It's less about doing the exact right thing or the right lifts or walk or routine or heart rate or whatever. It's really about consistency. And for me, there's pathways to consistency that maybe are surprising. So for example, fun, that's a huge way to make something consistent. Or community and relationships, those are pillars of brain health. Can we find a way to integrate those with exercise? So maybe for someone that's joining a group at the gym or a walking group, or man, there's these ladies in my neighborhood every single day, 6 a.m. They go past my house and like, they're chatting, they're talking, but like they're pros, and they're super consistent. And I think it's that community connection. So how can you make these things line up together? And also, there's many roads that lead to Rome. So for some people, you know, you look at January 1st, like everyone joins the gym and then they're empty 3 weeks later, right? Well, that's for a lot of people, like the gym is not the best thing. I don't like going to a gym. I don't find that to be fun. So figure out what works for you. Is it the gym? Is it walking outside? Is it running? Is it biking? Is it you know, maybe your thing is like gardening. You know, I know people who like they make yard work into an athletic event, and it's the thing that they like, and they approach it with gusto, and they're out there breathing pretty hard, like doing your thing. So figure out ways to do it creatively. And then maybe I'll end with this before we get to questions. Don't overdo it as well. And that's something, again, in my own personal experience and in coaching these endurance athletes, you know, you start hearing about these things, you know, the ultra run or the Ironman or whatever. These things can be good. They're often overly glorified. We also have, I think, you know, these kind of type A mentalities of like, oh, push now, push hard, sleep when I'm dead, never rest, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I learned, like, that's not wise. You know, you can absolutely put yourself into a hole and do negative things as far as just the entire endocrine system, cognitive function, Alzheimer's risk, et cetera, by exercising not enough, especially if you're also not fueling enough and if you're not sleeping enough. You know, you can definitely overdo it. And that's where, you know, again, if you listen to the podcast or you watch the movies and you hear these people like, you know, every day I run a marathon, or like, you know, every day I get up at, you know, whatever, 3 a.m. and go do my thing. Like, you know, that's maybe it's inspiring and it makes you sound tough, but I think, like, boy, temper that, pull that back a little bit and focus on the sleep. That's a big thing that I've changed since my dad was diagnosed, is like, you know, I still get up sometimes and I'll do my early morning mission because I'm excited to, like Annie said, hike a peak or, you know, hit some ski line or something. But I think a lot more about that, and I'm really focused on that good quality sleep and the recovery as well.
You know, Travis, one thing I wanted to ask you, just because I think so much of this is mindset, and I think you're talking a lot about mindset and how people should approach and think about exercise or physical activity. So when you just to get inside your head for a moment, so people, this might help a lot of people. When you are, and it's funny that I mean, I think it's really modest that you're speaking about it in such practical terms, because what you do is you go and literally do 100-mile runs, okay, at high altitudes. I mean, but when you're in the middle of that, I just want to know, you know, when you're at mile 76 and it's still uphill and there's no air up there because the air's so thin, what is actually going on in your mind? Like, what are you thinking? What's going through your head? I just want to know. It could help me, actually. Yeah. I hope it helps some other people. So
well, thanks, Ed. That's a good question. I mean, you know, maybe there's like lightning looming and I'm just like, I hope I don't, you know, I'm going to run down this hill as fast as I can so I don't die. I try to avoid that scenario. The long answer is I wrote another book called The Ultra Mindset, and that kind of goes into this stuff deeply. But briefly, I might say, like, it's all about the stories that we tell ourselves, and often for me, I think one of the things that one of my mantras, I guess, is I don't have to believe everything that I think. And so, you know, just like everyone else, I have this negative bullshit that goes through my mind, and negative ruminations and you know, doubts and uncertainties and just things that I'm dealing with. Like, we all have that. But I think if we step back, we can also choose, you know, am I going to buy into, you know, this story, or am I going to kind of rewrite a positive one, or choose something else that's the narrative that I'm going to roll with? So that can be huge, you know, with things like dietary habits, with exercise habits, even with, hey, maybe you're listening to this and like you're helping a family member navigate Alzheimer's. Maybe you've been diagnosed with this and you're listening to this. Like, that's a really hard place to be. And I think you probably have some choice with it, you know, and that's something like looking at my dad. I mean, you know, his disease has progressed significantly over the last 5 years, and he's choosing happiness. You know, he's He's not focusing on, here's all the things that I used to be able to do and I can't do anymore. He's saying, here's like the couple things left that I can do, and this is awesome. And I'm pumped to do it. And I know Liz is going to get into the caregiving aspect. Like, boy, talk about a grind. I mean, you know, you think running 100 miles is hard. Like, try taking care of someone day in and day out, you know, month after month, year after year. Like that is a real grind. And those, in my opinion, like those are the true heroes, and those are the people who really have an ultra mindset and can you know, think about the stories they're telling themselves, but also think about how they can take care of themselves, and hopefully think about how it can be a team initiative as well. That's one of the sayings from our book, is that life is a team sport, and you get to pick your team. So, you know, that can tie into all of this.
Trav, I have a practical question. So the recommendations for exercise in the average week is 150 minutes. Yep. For prevention of cardiovascular disease, and that also spills over into brain diseases like Alzheimer's. But there's also benefit that has been shown for Alzheimer's prevention at 300 minutes a week, which is really not as much as it seems, right? Yeah. So let's say that you were someone who was exercising somewhere between 150 and 300 minutes a week. What do you recommend breaking that down into cardiovascular, where, you know, your heart is pumping and it's hard to talk, like you're really working out, versus strength training, versus restorative work, such as say, like using a melt roller or something of that sort?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andy. And I mean, I think it's highly personalized, and it's going to vary significantly from person to person. It's going to vary significantly throughout our lifespan. So as we all get older, you know, unless you're like still in puberty or maybe in your 20s, like you know, in some ways you're trying to slow down the slowdown, especially when it comes to strength and muscle mass and bone density. So as we get older, doing weight bearing activities, whether that's going to the gym, doing weights, whether it's body weight stuff right in your house, doing some push-ups or pull-ups, or like I do my crunches every night when I'm reading to my daughter in bed. Like, you know, I can't really find time to go to the gym and do a core workout. So like I'm laying there reading, might as well just do my crunches, you know, make it sustainable. So that becomes increasingly important. The mobility stuff is very important, especially and for a lot of athletes. If we're trying to keep going with stuff, like injuries pop up, you know, your back starts hurting and this and that. And so often I find that doing that mobility stuff, like you said, the foam roller, or even if it's just some stretching or yoga, you know, a little 10-minute yoga routine. I mean, if I don't do yoga right when I get out of bed, like I'm not making it past the front door. So
I didn't know that you did yoga first thing in the morning.
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah. But those, like doing those things, they allow you to keep doing the other exercise and activity, hopefully. And then I would also say, you know, again, let's say it was 5 hours a week, maybe, if someone's doing aerobic activity. Some people, a natural inclination is to push that too hard. So your typical runner or someone getting into it, it's like, here's my 4-mile loop, and every day, like, I'm racing that. It's like, oh, what was my time yesterday? And today I'm going to go faster, and tomorrow I'm going to go faster than that. And that's a lot better than nothing. But generally speaking, and I think also for brain health and cardiovascular health, like 80% of that time that you're running or walking or biking or swimming, probably about 80% of that should be in a sustainable, what we call an aerobic, you know, exercise level. So that means that you could be using heart rate, you could be using power on the bike, you can do all these things. But for most people, that means, can you hold a conversation with someone? You know, could you talk with someone on the phone? Could you talk with someone next to you? Maybe it's you. And I go on a lot of runs with my dogs, and I'm like, all right, can I talk to my dogs right now? You know, so try doing that, because that's if all you're doing is every time you go out, you're just going as fast as you can. That's not a way to sustainability, and that's a way to, you know, get injured and burn out and not have the maximum benefit. So, you know, maybe 20% of the time or so you are pushing it, or you're running faster, you're biking faster, or whatever. But overall, most of it, and maybe that's why I think for a lot of people it's like, oh, I gotta go running. It's like, because you think of it as this thing where you're just out there racing. Most of it should feel like pretty easy and sustainable. Kind of an all day sort of effort.
Yeah, and data also shows that even, just moving your body every day, even really light exercise, like you mentioned, gardening is one, like working around the house, even older adults who just move a little bit every day naturally throughout the day, like they do in blue zones. They don't go to the gym, but they do walk up the hill to go to the grocery store and back. This is shown to be beneficial for brain health.
Yeah. I tell you, I say this all the time, like the hero of my team is my mom, who, is really the person day to day who takes care of my dad. And she's done a great job of creatively figuring out ways to keep her own health and fitness. And currently she's like, she goes on YouTube and she's got this great series of exercises that you do right there in your living room, or she's doing kind of some chin-ups and pull-ups with some weight assistance and stuff. And even if you're thinking like, oh, I'm stuck at home, whether it's from work or caregiving or whatever, there may be creative ways that you can find little snippets of time, and those things add up. Like, it's all about, you don't have to, it's not all or nothing when it's your diet or whatever else. Do a lot of little things, and they'll add up.
Love it.
All right. Well, looks like
Hey,
Tom
Tom.
has joined us.
Hello.
Hi,
Thank you
Tom.
so much for having me.
Hey, we just covered. Thanks so much for joining, Tom. We just covered diet and nutrition, and also staying, physically active and the mindset involved in that. And I think since you're jumping in here right now, I think it's a great time to kind of cover cognitive training and just some of the lifestyle factors behind that as well. So yeah, and by the way, your beard is getting bigger every time.
So yeah,
This is
one of my
awesome.
friends, I was discussing with him regarding my beard, and he said, when in doubt, grow it out. So that's where I am. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with it, but hey, we'll let it ride for a little bit. Yeah, so to jump in, sorry.
Tom, great to see you.
Yeah, great to
It's
see
great
you
to
too.
see
It's
you.
wonderful seeing
This is
everybody.
great.
Hey,
We
Annie.
have like a mindset matters party.
Yeah, so cognitive activities. This is one of those things that I think everybody can obviously jump on board and say cognitive activities, cognitive training are very, very good. One thing that I always find intriguing is, depending upon the researcher that you talk to, they'll say diet's the best, or physical activity is the best, or cognitive activity and training is the best, or sleep. And as I think all of us here understand, it's a compilation of lifestyle. It's everything. And so from a cognitive activity perspective, the whole thing is keeping our brains working, really trying to push the neuroplasticity and the cognitive reserve and the neuroresilience just as we age. So in the event we run into a detrimental issue, be it a stroke or have deposition of neuropathology, anything like that, that we can bounce back or have different avenues for our brain to make those connections. Now, it's so wonderful to talk about this, because I was just actually talking with participants of one of our trials earlier today about one of the programs that's used for cognitive training, and how difficult and frustrating those activities can become. And the reason it's so difficult and I'll say annoying is because the goalposts move every single time. Each time that you do something well, it is going to make it more challenging. And for us as we age, and I'll back up, when we're kids, we expect things to be difficult. We go into math, and math, cool, 2 plus 2. Now all of a sudden we have to learn times tables. Now all of a sudden we're algebra, trig, calc, whatever it may be. We accept these as being difficult. However, when we're older, we move towards things that we excel at and move away from things that are more difficult and challenging, just by the nature of it. And that's just what we do. So trying to be very cognizant about how we interact day to day and how we challenge ourselves is very important. We want to actively move those goalposts, but unfortunately, we don't typically do it. And that's where the cognitive activities and cognitive training can come into play. Learning a new language, it's difficult, but it is going to cause your brain to work tremendously. Learning to play an instrument, difficult. Again, it'll push you a bit. And then, then you have programs that are just going to drive different domains or cognitive abilities, whether or not it's working memory, visuospatial memory, and really help kind of tease out how you're interacting with your day-to-day life. And, it's also, I think, a lot of fun from a cognitive activities perspective, going out, going to museums, learning about history, learning about artists or composers. It's stuff that you never really think about really pushing yourself in, but it helps you delve into something that is new. And if it's new to you, it's going to help. And so if we think about cognitive age as well, we always think about just school, for instance. Let's take Annie, for instance. Annie did undergrad, then she did medical school, then she did residency, and then she rode this line, right, for a while. And a lot of people will enter their career and then may not push themselves further beyond that. And so once you stop pushing yourself, that's when you're going to potentially start to slide. And like Annie, you push yourself and do something totally different, totally brand new. She's having to learn, various things. She wrote a book. She's running a business. She's learning about all these various things that are new to her, that then allow her brain to function in a different way and drive things better. And so, that's the one piece of advice, is doing things new and different and challenging, picking up a new career after you retire, or volunteering after you retire. I appreciate, put the work in and, work hard, play hard, and especially in retirement, but still challenge yourself in ways that are meaningful, just as you're moving along. So
one word that I tell myself, and tell me if this is helpful, is for people to think about this, is I use the word, I think of the word threshold. Where is the threshold, and am I always pushing the threshold? And basically, I guess like you're saying, do I feel as I'm doing something cognitively kind of dumb because it's so new to me, right? That's how I know I'm at the threshold. I feel dumb. I'm there. I'm at the threshold.
It is, and it's so frustrating. There's one of the games called, I forget what it's called. There's one called Route 66, and there's a bubble game. And bubbles show up on the screen, and then all of a sudden all these other bubbles show up, and you have to track these bubbles as they start moving. And I started that, and I got all 4. And I said, awesome, I'm smart. And I went to 5, and I was like, wow, I'm still smart. And I got to 6, did it well. 7, cool. Got to 8, boom, missed it. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm a little disappointed. Then it went to 7, I missed it. I was like, whoa, what's happening? And then it went to 6, and I was like, oh no. Then I was like, well, I thought I was smart. Then it just slipped all the way back to 4 because I got so anxious about missing those on the high end that it then deteriorated, as I was progressing. So yes, that aspect of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and also understanding that this is challenging, and it's meant to be challenging. It's going to be frustrating because it's new and different. I mean, I myself right now am working on understanding omics, metabolomics, proteomics, genetic predispositions. It is challenging. And I look at papers and I have no idea what I'm reading because it's so far over my head. But I understand at some point I'll understand it. And so I push myself to delve a bit more and learn a bit more. And my God, I sit there with a manuscript and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is exhausting. It is mentally exhausting to do this. But I know it's going to pay off in the end. And I also know that it's going to benefit me from a educational perspective.
I'm so happy to hear that, because that's how I feel every time I look at the brain supplement studies. Which I recently did a big review on. I thought my brain was going to break. It was just so complicated.
Yes.
But
I've done
time,
so many.
and if you stick with it, you come to some level of clarity, and then your brain is at a different level when it comes to that topic. It's learning.
Yeah, and it's so nice because then you start making little connections here and there. And for a lot of individuals that I've talked to, whenever they talk about the brain training that they're doing and the visuospatial or the working memory, and that their day-to-day recall has gotten better, or they're remembering where they're placing things throughout their house. And we talk about distractibility and how distractibility can really make it feel like you are slipping cognitively. But if you're very diligent and thoughtful about your day-to-day practices, you'll feel just more in tune with where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if I purposely and volitionally put my keys in the same place every single day, if they do not go in that place, they might as well be lost. But that's because I don't want to have to think about where I'm putting my keys. And so I could understand why if somebody moves their keys day to day, that they would feel, potentially impaired, because it's moving. It's an abnormal, place that you're dealing with. So it's removing barriers from your life while also challenging yourself.
And I love what you say about making yourself feel uncomfortable. When you're starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable in a topic or something you're reading or listening to on a podcast, you're in a good place for building cognitive reserve. Because if you're just reading things you already know and learning things you already learned, and you're not really building any new neural connections.
Right.
So it's good. That word uncomfortable really is a good one to remember.
Right. That's great.
If you're ever in any doubt of how to feel uncomfortable, you can always start a nonprofit and fill your board with people that are a lot smarter than you are. That'll do the trick every time.
Well, we got a few minutes left, and I think we really want to hit the stress management and the caregiving side. And this is the perfect way to bring it in, actually, Liz, because that's where you're at. You're in it day in and day out from a caregiver standpoint.
I think in 3 minutes, there's not a whole lot we can cover on this topic. Although I think it's a great place to pick up if we all want to do this again on the Mind What Matters site, maybe another day in June. I think it'd be a really good time to talk about that. But I'll just kind of leave with something Tom said. You mentioned that it was really all about, picking and choosing and finding ways to sort of challenge yourself, but not in a way that's overwhelming or all at once. And what I'll say about caregiving is this, nobody really knows when they're going to become a caregiver, right? It's not something you plan for. It's not really something that you see coming in the game of life. And one of the things I really like to tell people in stress, it's so important, because trust me when I tell you, I got it very wrong for the first 10 years that I was doing it. Not only was I trying to do it alone, thinking I can manage this somehow on my own two shoulders, but number two, all of these things are so great. Eating well, getting a good night's rest. I mean, the sleep is so critical. Everything falls apart when you're not well rested. No one can manage the difficulties of an average life when you're sleep deprived. But when it hits the fan and then you're sleep deprived, it brings on a whole other layer of difficulty and complexity. But I will say that you can eat healthy all you want. You can exercise, you can sleep, you can do brain training. At the end of the day, something Travis said at the beginning, you have to have a team. You have to have a community around you. And I'm really not talking specifically about your own family. It's interesting when I talk to people and I ask, who's your team? What's your support system around you? Most people just say, oh, I have this one best friend I go to with everything. Or I have my sister. Or my husband is my person. And when things really get challenging, or perhaps you become a caregiver of your spouse, there has to be something else around you to sort of support you as you're going through the hardest parts of your life. And it might be caring for Alzheimer's, it might be developing Alzheimer's yourself, or another critical illness. But it becomes really important to always have these pillars to lean back on. Meaning, when you become a caregiver and something bad happens in your life or a medical event happens, those are not the times that you're going to wake up and decide, oh, I know, I'm going to start exercising 5 days a week and doing brain training, and I'm going to eat healthy and make sure I'm shopping all organic, eating, no processed food. No, those are the times in your life where you're going to reach for the Doritos that Ed's talking about on Super Bowl Sunday. You know, you're going to want to stay up all night, you know, binging Netflix or a series that's probably bad for your brain. Those are the times when your health suffers just naturally by the state of having trauma happen in your life. So if you have these pillars set up and you're really concentrating on more holding back what your pillars are instead of just all of a sudden trying to develop these habits, you're going to be better set up to manage the traumatic events in your life, such as becoming a caregiver. Because it is hard. I said to my husband last night, you know, being a caregiver, particularly in the end stages of a disease, which my personal type of disease, my mother has early onset, it's really hard. You know, it's kind of like being in a pool and having somebody's foot on your head all the time. And occasionally you come up and you think you're about to take a breath of air, and maybe you even get half a breath, and you're like, okay, I can make it through this. And then the next thing you know, the foot's right back down on you, and there you are underwater again. It's really hard. The emotional toll that it takes, it's just one of the most challenging aspects to life, in my opinion. Caregiving specifically, but Alzheimer's caregiving or dementia caregiving, where you're taking care of somebody that doesn't appreciate what you're doing. They may or may not. They may not know you. They're not in any way, shape, or form like who they were before. It's tremendously difficult. And it is, you know, it'll change you. It really will over time if you don't take care of yourself. And particularly because of the duration of these diseases. You know, they go on 5 to 7 years as average, but I'm 13 years into my caregiving experience with probably another 18 months, possibly even ahead of me in end stage. So you really do just, I want everyone who's listening today to think about everything that Travis has said and that Tom said and that Annie said, and try and start incorporating these things into your life now, as slowly as you have to. Travis, what's your favorite phrase? You know, as slow as we can, or as fast as we can, as slow as we must. But really, truly, take it step by step. None of these things have to be solved in a day or a week or a month. If it takes you a year to start incorporating these habits into your life while you're building your community around you, and again, I'll say, find people who need help other than yourself. Even if you're not a caregiver, go volunteer somewhere. Get yourself immersed in the lives of people who are struggling on a daily basis. And a great reason for that is, number one, when you find yourself struggling one day, not only will you be better suited to sort of understand the needs of those around you, but also you'll have some perspective, right? It's not like you were just living this, you know, this life and you didn't know hardship or you didn't know the ugly sides of life until all of a sudden they smack you in the face. You know, it's really a good idea to just make yourself smaller than the world around you. You know, let yourself like be needed by others before catastrophe strikes. It just helps keep everything in perspective about your own life. You know, you're less likely to compare yourself to others, which is also just a ugly game a lot of people play, especially now with social media being such a huge part of everyone's life. But to the extent you can really dive into your community, find who your people are, and then give back to them while you're building out all these other things that everybody's spoken to you about today, you'll be better suited to handle caregiving when and if it comes for you. So
Liz,
that's what I would say on
ton of
that.
wisdom there. Can we get to one quick listener question? Because this was really good. Hannah, thank you for typing this in. Hannah said, hi all, my grandma is progressing quite fast with dementia and is resisting more help. Any tips for us to try and convince her she needs a little more help? Maybe Liz or Annie, do either of you have any brief thoughts on that?
You go first.
Annie, do you want to go first? Do you want me to? So this is a real problem. People that have memory impairment, there's actually a protective mechanism in the brain that actually, it tells them nothing's wrong. Even if they're noticing things about their life that's changing, there is literally, I don't even remember what it's called. Tom, I'm sure there's like a medical phrase for this, but they really don't think that there is something wrong. So it's sort of like arguing with somebody who's saying the sky's purple today, the sky's purple, when you and I both know it's blue, but you're not going to change the mind of somebody who has dementia, right? Their brains are not working properly. So the best thing that you can do is sort of, you know, I hate to say this, but you have to make the choices that keep your loved ones safe. At the end of the day, for us, my mother was not okay. She was not safe living alone. We knew it. She obviously thought she was fine, but her health was really starting to suffer, and there were things that were at risk. You know, her life was at risk, ultimately. So my brother and I sort of stepped in, and, you know, we tried very hard to put caregivers in the home. She was not, you know, very receptive to that. What I would say is, if I had it to do over again, I think that finding the right person is really a key component. A lot of times, you know, families just go out and they hire any sort of at-home care group to come in. And I hate to say this, but so many of them are not trained really well with Alzheimer's and dementia. There may be an hourly worker who's had just a couple of hours of training and not much more, and they don't really know how to deal with and sort of communicate with someone who has dementia. Finding a really high quality trained individual who knows what they're doing will put you and your loved one up for more success, potentially, of having that work, that at-home caregiver work, so that they're more receptive to having that person in their home. Now, they're going to have a couple of bad days, maybe even a couple of bad weeks, but ultimately I resisted it for so long myself, worried about what my mom would say, how she would react, but ultimately they always do turn around and then end up being very grateful for the help, and then they lean very heavily on that caregiver. So what comes out is a fight at the beginning, and it is discomfort, believe me. Bad names will get called, things might get thrown. It's not a pretty scenario for most families. It certainly wasn't for me. I can't even begin to tell you the ugliness that happened in our family for several months regarding this. But you know what's best for your loved one. And if they are needing that help, it's up to you and really on you to just force it, honestly. And, you know, if they're throwing things at them or they're hitting them, then, you know, you have to make other decisions. And please contact me through Mind What Matters on our website, and I can talk further with you about this if you still have questions. But it does take a little time. It takes 2 to 3, maybe even 4 full weeks before your loved one will become comfortable with them. But you will see that relationship change. They will become dependent upon the help, and they will actually be grateful for it. Their anxiety will be less, knowing that they're not alone and that they have someone to depend on, and that will actually improve their behaviors too.
Liz, that's awesome. So much wisdom. And I just, you know, Hannah or anyone else who's listening, quick shout out to you to, like, know that you have a team behind you. Like, this stuff, man, it is so hard. And especially, again, if you're in that caregiving role, you may be feeling isolated and alone, and like, it's really, really hard. And I just want people to know, like, man, you got a team behind you. You're not alone in this stuff. And, you know, we may not ever meet in person or anything, but it's really important to know that.
And I don't also add, I saw Charlene type in denial. And I think it's important just to recognize that what your loved one is going through is a combination of denial, maybe mixed with pride, which we saw with my mother, who's still living at home, with my brother living there, and caregivers coming in. But she's fired, I mean, in the beginning of the first 5 years of her Alzheimer's, she fired pretty much every caregiver we tried to get for her, because there was a large component of pride and denial. Like, I can do this for myself and I don't want anyone helping me. So you just persistently, like Liz said, it's all about being safe. It's all about keeping them safe. And also recognizing that sense of pride that is always still there. I think Liz had the most brilliant tip that she posted on one of her Instagram reels. Was her mom was outgrowing her clothes. You know, our loved ones gain weight when they're not so active anymore, when they have dementia, Alzheimer's. And so her clothes were just not looking very good, and they weren't fitting well either. And so Liz went out and bought her a bunch of new clothes that she knew she would like, but she pretended she was coming straight from the dry cleaner. So instead of saying, look, Mom, these clothes don't fit you anymore, I bought you newer, bigger clothes, she brought them all in their plastic wrapped bags on hangers, like, oh, Mom, I just picked up your clothes for you. So sometimes it's, you know, just really addressing that pride, I think, just kind of help. Maybe have things go a little bit more smoothly.
You do. You have to be creative. And for a long time, I felt guilty about doing stuff like that. At the end of the day, if it makes them feel like they're holding on to their pride and they are feeling more comfortable, that's what our whole job is as caregivers, right? Like that's the end goal, is help the person who is sick. It's no different than if, and I wish that I had seen this in my first 10 years of journey, instead of arguing with my mom or trying to her, you know, on my own with my words, if somebody has cancer and they've just had a dose of chemo and they're throwing up, you're not going to tell them, oh, just eat. You're going to feel better. You have to eat now. Like, no. And with Alzheimer's, it's no different. You have to understand that you're dealing with somebody whose brain is not functioning properly. They can't make rational decisions. They don't know what's best anymore. And that's not just a catch-all for you to throw anything and everything you've ever wanted to at your parent and just completely ignore what they have to say. But even in my mom's end stage now, she still is able to occasionally verbalize things that she needs if you're listening carefully enough. So it's important to do that and just to really meet them where they are. It makes both of your lives go more smoothly. I promise you that.
Yeah, well, thank you, Liz.
Oh,
you know,
thanks everybody.
And by the way, yeah, this is a thing that connects us all. Actually, is Mind What Matters, and you know, we're all involved. We all support it, and so you know, we all have that personal connection to the disease or in dementia. So, so one thing I just want to mention is that as we wrap up here is, yeah, go follow Mind What Matters. It's and follow Mind What Matters. Sign up, donate, because it goes to a great cause to give people rest.
Yeah, if this call or if this Instagram Live has helped you at all today in any way, shape, or form, or you've learned something from it, we would so generously, we would be so graciously just grateful that just number one, that we have you listening to us and that, you know, you're interested in this topic. It's so critically important, not just for you to learn it yourself, but for then you to take it and spread it around to everybody else that you know. So maybe we'll make a dent in this whole silver tsunami thing. But again, if you learned anything and you'd like to make a small donation to Mind What Matters, it will help change the life of a caregiver out there who's really in need and needs a break. It's been a tough year for all nonprofits. The economy is not amazing, but even if it's just $3, $5, $10, we would be really grateful. You can go to our website and hit the donate button. It's www.mindwhatmattersnonprofit.org.
And obviously follow Travis, follow Annie, follow Tom. I know Tom, I don't know how active you are on social media. I know you're in the lab or basically out in the clinic all the time, but follow us. What we're going to do on the NeuroReserve end is we're going to have an article that actually summarizes all these pillars that we've been through, in addition to a lot of the clips and insights that came out of this discussion. And we'll go ahead and post that. You take a look at that on our link tree. So we just hope this is helpful. This is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month. So this is this is the time of year to really sit back and reflect on your own brain health and the brain health of your loved ones and what we can do. So, thanks so much for spending the time with us.
Thank you.
Today.
Take care of your
Travis,
brains,
Annie,
people.
and
Yeah.
Tom.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one, everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.